Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, my friends, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to join us. Tremendous amount going on in the world lately. I know if you've been watching this program, we've had a couple of reruns the last 2 weeks. I would like to apologize for that. We try to keep the show constantly up to date, but the necessities of work and life so far and so forth have kept me and us away from the studio for a couple of weeks. So I appreciate the viewing audience very, very much, and our apologies for having to do 2 weeks of reruns. I hope that you have found them interesting. For those of you that have been watching the program for all these years now, I hope that it was refreshing for you. And for those of you that are the new viewers, which we get all the time, I know you would have found the information very, very interesting. We are going to be doing a little bit of speaking about a gentleman that was very instrumental in not only bringing forth the American war machine into World War I, but also we're going to be speaking of this gentleman who was also very, very instrumental in organizing as a liaison, just as Senator Aldrich was out of Rhode Island, a liaison with the international bankers that basically took over the money system of this country through creating crises, particularly the crises of 1908 and so forth. And his name is Edward Mandell House. We're going to get into him very much. I want to read a statement that is from the Congressional Record that he had with a conversation with President Wilson. Now, if you have been watching this program, you're very familiar with the fact that President Wilson, when he had realized what he did by creating the Federal Reserve Act, was very upset with himself, and also very upset with what he saw the future of his nation was going to be. So before we get into that, I just want to make mention of a couple of things. One of them is that please keep your eye on what's going on with Fukushima. We are going to be doing a show on Fukushima in the near future, but I want folks to please keep your eye on what's going on with that, because I truly believe that, number one, as always, the information is being hidden from not just the people of Japan, but for the world for that matter. And also the information that is coming out is very dire, and I mean incredibly dire. This is going to affect the earth, the food chain of the Pacific Ocean and beyond. And I just want everyone to understand that you have to keep your eye on that, and we'll be doing a show on that in the near future. And as a warning, because my friends, this is a catastrophic event that is going on in the world right now. And 90 million gallons of radioactive water are being released into the Pacific Ocean every 30 days to keep them rods cool. 90 million gallons. There's a thing called the deathbed or the death rate, depending on which oceanographer you talk to. But basically what it is they will do a survey of the surface of a particular part of the ocean, and they look for things that have died, things that have not been consumed by predators and so forth. So what they've discovered, the average is 1%. The average, what they call deathbed in the Pacific Ocean, is 1%. Well, in areas outside of northern Honshu, in Japan, that deathbed rate right now is 90%. The tuna that make the migration are all dying, so far with the seals and so forth. So I really believe this is going to be a very detrimental event, again, not just to the people of Japan, but also the world. So please, please, please keep your eye on that and prepare for you and your family what you deem necessary. The other thing we'd like to keep our eye on is Edward Snowden. Of course, you're not hearing anything more about Edward Snowden, and the reason why is they certainly do not want you to know the information that he is releasing. Edward Snowden is, in my eye, a hero. And not just an American hero, but a hero to humanity. You know, and you got to think about this. They want to prosecute the government, the insolvent corporation, want to prosecute Edward Snowden for giving information, quote unquote, to the enemy. To the enemy. When you read their words, their language, the Justice Department, Chuck Schumer, and all the rest of these people, well, who's the enemy? He's giving information to the people of the United States, the people of the world, as to what is being waged against us. So, my friends, it is an indirect, unbeknowingly to them, because they don't expect the American people to think this out. As Henry Kissinger said one time so well, you can bank on the ignorance of the American people. Well, folks, who are the enemy? The enemy are you and I. The enemy are you and I. And we've gone over this too many times to really start it right now. But, you know, the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1933 from the amendment from the original Trading with the Enemies Act of 1917, where they changed the definition of enemy to include all citizens of the United States and those under the jurisdiction thereof. So not only in their own language, but also in their actions and also with what they're speaking publicly, we are the declared enemy. Department of Homeland Security. Who's the #1 terrorist threat? Returning veterans. And if you go down the list of who they deem as terrorists, well, who are the terrorists? People that have more than 7 days worth of food in their house. #1's returning veterans, constitutionalists, homeschoolers. All these groups of people have been deemed the enemy by the insolvent corporation that you know as the United States government. So I think it's very interesting when I read the statement that they want to prosecute him for giving information to the enemy. Well, I had to ask myself, well, who are they deeming the enemy? You and I are the enemy, my friends. Okay, so before we get into Mr. House, I wanted to talk to you about this arrangement that was made between J.P. Morgan Incorporated and the Just Us system. Yes, I know, I did not say justice, I said the Just Us system. So this is how the headline reads, rather interesting. J.P. Morgan pays $2 billion, B Bravo, to avoid prosecution for its involvement in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. Unbelievable. So you mean to tell me that they're so guilty that they didn't even want to be investigated, that they agreed to pay $2 billion? Now, do you remember when Karzai got found guilty and what his punishment was? It was pennies on the dollar from the profit. Do you remember these banks that we had done some time ago, the banks that were found guilty of laundering drug money? And remember, we took our little simple calculator and we figured out what the percentage of the money that they laundered that they were discovered and admitted to, and I'm sure there's more, as compared to what the fines were. And we read this verbatim to you. And what was the percentage of the fines to their profit margin? Do you remember, my friends? It was 0.0001%. It was 1,000th of 1% of their profits. So I have to ask myself, if J.P. Morgan is agreeing to pay $2 billion with a B Bravo dollars to the insolvent corporation of the Just Us system, what was their profit margin? They must have felt very comfortable. Folks, I will tell you, it's in the trillions of dollars that this company has made. And guess what? Not only have they made it, but with your sweat equity, you gave them, and in the future, and your children and your grandchildren's future, to them because of the top funds. Okay, so let's continue. J.P. Morgan pays $2 billion to avoid prosecution for its involvement in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff has said all along that J.P. Morgan knew and knowingly profited from his Ponzi scheme. Okay? Now, so J.P. Morgan has agreed to pay the government, and we're going to get a real kick out of this, $2 billion to avoid investigation and prosecution. So they didn't even have an investigation. And the Justice Department didn't even go after them for the monies, for the actions, for criminal prosecution. Nah. You just pay us a little bit of money, $2 billion. We'll put it in our CIST fund. And I know you're probably saying, what is the CIST fund? Well, my friends, you watch this program because in about 4 weeks, we are going to be doing a program on where does your money go once you pay the court fines? How much money is it? Where does it go? Where does it wind up when it's all said and done? And you're going to be shocked at where your fines go once you pay them through the corporate court system, okay? So just keep this figure in your head, $2 billion, and in 4 weeks from now, because we are going to be showing a documentary for the next 2 weeks that I know you're really going to enjoy. But you just keep that $2 billion figure in your head because it's peanuts compared to what they are profiting. Okay. While this may sound like a lot of money, it's spare sofa change for a big bank like JP Morgan. And it's not just a Madoff scheme. These are some other things that the Justice Department had information on that they were going to be able to investigate and prosecute JP Morgan. The big banks, including JP Morgan, are manipulating virtually every market, both in the financial sector and in the real economy. Well, wait a minute. The financial sector and the real economy? Yeah, because the financial sector is made up out of a delusion. These derivatives have no backing except for your belief that they're worth something. And the real economy is the manufacturing and things like that. Of course, there's not a lot of that left in this country. Oh, by the way, my friends, I really got a thrill this morning when they said, this is wonderful. The United States economy has created 286,000 jobs this year. Everyone should be happy. What they didn't tell you on the other perspective of that is that the economy on an average basis lost 355,000 per month. But you should be happy because they created 286,000 jobs in all of last year. Unbelievable. And you know, friends, people say, well, how are we going to turn this economy around? How are we going to turn it around? I'm going to tell you the one way we can turn this around and eliminate most of the problems that besiege our nation. And that is do away with the Federal Reserve, which is a private, foreign, for-profit banking corporation that controls every aspect of our nation. You think the President of the United States, all he is an elected CEO, or I should say appointed CEO of an insolvent corporation. That's all he is. So if this is just a puppet show that we're allowed to see. Okay, let us continue here. Okay, here are some just of the recent improprieties by the big banks. This is multiple now, okay? Laundering money for terrorists. Now, we covered this, my friends, some time ago. The HCBS employee who blew the whistle on the bank's moneying laundry for terrorist and drug cartels says that the giant banks are still laundering money, saying, the public needs to know that money is still being funneled through HCBS to directly buy guns and bullets to kill our soldiers. Banks financing terrorists affects every single American. He also said, continually, it is disgusting that our banks are still financing terror even on the anniversary of 9/11 today, 9/11/2013. Financing illegal arm deals and funding the manufacture of cluster bombs and other arms which are banned in most of the world. Handling money for rogue military operations. That's the black ops money. Laundering money for drug cartels. Drug dealers kept the banking system afloat during the depths of the 2008 financial crisis. Another whistleblower has said America is losing the drug war because our banks are still financing the drug cartels. banks financing drug cartels affects every single American. Engaging in mafia-style big rigging fraud against local governments. Shaving money off of virtually every pension transaction they've handled over the course of decades, stealing collectively trillions of dollars from pensions worldwide. And my friends, I don't have the time to read all these samples, but just right here alone, there are 16 particular samples that they list. Just for the sake of time, I don't have time to do them all. But let's talk about this. Do you see what happened 2 weeks ago? The federal judge in the District of Michigan said that, yes, the city of Detroit has every right to go ahead and alter and or take the pensions of the firemen, the policemen, and the city employees. What happened to the guarantees that were made to the serfs? Serfs do not have guarantees. Serfs do not have rights. Serfs have merely privileges. And privileges can be altered or taken away by the grantor. This is what this is about. This is what this is about. Okay? We do not have rights anymore, my friends. We have merely privileges. And this is another example of it. And these corporate courts are backing up the insolvent corporations. Of course, we think they're going to rule against their brethren corporation. They're not going to rule against their brethren corporation. They're going to look out for the corporation. And when you go to court looking for redemption against the government, you are battling a sister corporation of the insolvent corporation, the government. It's really incredible when you think about it. But you may ask yourself, what alternative do we have? And there is an alternative. Okay, manipulating aluminum and copper prices, manipulating gold prices on a daily basis. Now, these are all things that J.P. Morgan and these larger banks have decided, we're just going to pay the penance of $2 billion because we're profiting billions of dollars every day on this stuff. Charging storage fees to store gold bullion, and listen to this, without even buying or storing any gold. Raiding allocated gold accounts. Now, you may say, well, what gold accounts did they raid? Why don't you try the nation of Germany? Germany last year, and we covered this, wanted to do an asset evaluation of their gold they have stored in this country. Guess what? The Federal Reserve Private Banking Corporation said, no, we're not going to allow you to inspect your own gold. Now, it's interesting enough, the last time that I know in history that this happened was in 1954-55, when the government of France under Charles de Gaulle wanted to do the same thing. They had, during the war, they had shipped their gold and silver reserve literally to New York, to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And so after the war, France is back on their feet. De Gaulle says, I want to do a complete accountability of the gold. The Federal Reserve says, no, we ain't going to do that. You know what de Gaulle did? He sent the entire French Navy to New York. Look it up. Actually, we covered this some 3 or 4 years ago. He sent the entire French Navy to New York to get the gold at gunpoint. And I'm afraid, my friends, if Germany had the means to do it, they'd be doing the same thing. Because Germany is very upset. And now you add into the idea that the NSA and the CIA have not only been spying on you and I, but they've been spying on our allies with all the technology they have. And you know what really is interesting? Is that they can spy on me and you from every aspect. They have, from the DNA they've taken at place of birth, to all the social media, to the education, to the medicine, to the financial transaction, all this data they have built on each and every one of us, all this technology that goes into play to do it, but son of a gun, they just can't get this affordable health care website up and running. Just can't crack that website. Oh, and by the way, they can't account for $63 million that they admit they cannot account for with what you know as Obamacare. So it's being delayed. The benefits are being delayed, but you've been paying for it for the last 2.5 years. Just can't get that down, guys. We just cannot put up a website that's going to work. You know what they should do? They should go talk to my 12-year-old niece that is very, very fluent with computers. I'm sure she could get it done for them. Okay, committing massive and pervasive fraud, both when they initiated mortgage loans and when they foreclosed on them. Now, we have talked about this. What's a mortgage? French word, death pledge. Think of morgue. Think of morgue, my friends. What's a morgue? Death pledge. Okay? And we've talked about the mechanics of a mortgage. And how does that work? In case you're new to the program, this is how it works. You got to understand, my friends, we're on a 2% fractional banking system. And what that means is this. For every dollar, of course, we don't have dollars anymore, we have Federal Reserve notes, but for every dollar that is of liability, the Federal Reserve says they only have to have 2 cents of asset to back it up. So obviously, do the quick math, there's a 98-cent void for every dollar of liability. So how can they do that? How can they loan money? Although we don't have money, as we know from our Black's Law Dictionary, money does not encompass debt. Federal Reserve note, what's a note? An acknowledgement of debt. But please go along with the facade here. So how can they loan money if they don't have a dollar to back it up? They only have 2 cents to back it up. Well, let me explain it to you, my friends. Here's what they do. You walk into that lending institution and you say, I want to borrow $100,000 for this house. They say, okay. So you sign this promise, you put up the property, of course you don't own it. The Bank of International Settlements literally owns your property, Basel, Switzerland. We've gone through all that before. But for the example that we're talking about now, you go into that lending institution and you say to them, I want to borrow $100,000. I want to buy this piece of property. Okay, very good. Of course, you don't really buy the property, my friends. You're only a tenant in common, or a joint tenant. You don't own anything. You're a debtor, you're a bonded debtor in a commercial law system. You can't own anything. You don't have a laudial title, you have certificate of title. A laudial title is, in Latin, absolute. You own it. Okay? But let's go on with the example we're talking about. So you go in there, you want the $100,000. The bank says, okay, you're going to put up the property as collateral, and you're going to sign this promissory note. Promissory note, you're going to agree to pay X amount of money, at X amount of term, at X amount of interest. Are you with me? Very simple so far, right? Makes perfect sense. We do it every day. Problem is, they don't have the full dollar to back up. I mean, really, through the math, my friends, they've got $2,000 to back up that $100,000, and they're $98,000 in the hole. How do they do this? Well, what they do is they do this. You sign that promissory note. What is our money system based on? Notes. Notes. Federal Reserve note. They take your promissory note, your promise to pay, the interest, the term, and the payment, and they put it on their ledgers as an asset, and then, with your promise to pay, they cut you a check. I know you're shaking your head now saying this can't be true. It is. It is. So not only are these big bankers committing the fraud, and then you're paying them every month for all these years, and if you miss 3 months, well, guess what? Now they're going to get the property too. Amazing. That's how we have a fiat money system. It's not really money, my friends. It's a medium of exchange. It's a debt instrument. So J.P. Morgan and others have been committing massive and pervasive fraud, both when they initiate the mortgage, and that's what they're talking about, initiating the mortgage. That's fraud. Because if I give you $10 $10 in one $10 bill and you give me 2 5s, do I owe you anything? No. If I create the asset, how is it that I owe you? Especially, my friends, if you accept it as an asset and put it on your entry on the ledger as an asset. And then you not only accept it as an asset, you cut me a check with it. That's what they're talking about even when they initiate the mortgage. That's the fraud. When they both initiate the mortgage loans and when they foreclose on them. Now, why is that? I'm going to tell you why. Because you didn't owe them a thing. You gave them something that they agreed to was an asset. They put it on their ledgers as an asset, as I just said, and they cut you a check with that asset. You don't owe them a thing. That is fraud. Now listen to this one. By pledging the same mortgage multiple times to different buyers. My friends, this is probably a little tough to understand, but believe it or not, your mortgages are sold. They are sold. I invite you to read the book, Clouded Titles. He gets into the absolute mechanics of how this goes on. This would be like you selling your car to 10 different people and collecting money from 10 different people, but you only got one car. They literally sell that note to different buyers. But don't worry about it, because when the whole thing came crashing down, they were not only laundering the drug cartel money, but you came along and gave them more sweat equity, because the insolvent corporation that is subservient to these bankers told you to do so. And without doing any investigation, and I'm speaking as a whole, third person here, we, the American people, just went along for the ride. Well, the ride's not a level playing field, my friends. The ride is all downhill. As I've said before, we as a people have got to stop thinking in terms of the divide paradigm of left and right. You better stop thinking about left and right and start thinking about up and down, because that's where we're going, down. Cheating homeowners by gaming laws meant to protect people from unfair foreclosures. Committing massive fraud to the tune of over 800 trillion Tango dollars market, which affects everything from mortgages, student loans, small business loans, and city financing. My friends, you talk to the average college student today and you ask them about what's going on with their student loans. Manipulating the $100 trillion derivative market, all a facade. Engaging inside trading, pushing investments which they knew were terrible, and then betting against the same investments to make the money for themselves. Folks, they were selling investments to the general public and then betting what's called shorts on them. And what a short is that you're betting that this stock is going to go downward motion. That's called a short. So they're selling you high and betting low, and they're making money on both ends. And then when it did crash, guess what? You came along to bail them out again. Good job. They're very happy with you. Engaging in unlawful front running, engaging in unlawful wash trades, manipulating corporate bonds through derivative schemes, charging veterans unlawful mortgage fees. Yeah, and you thought the VA was looking out for you. Helping the richest to illegally hide assets, cooking their books, bribery, bullying ratings, violently cracking down on peaceful... I mean, folks, it just goes on and goes on and goes on. I don't even have the time to continue it. Okay. My friends, you have got to start to at least ask questions and pay attention to truthful answers, no matter how painful it is. We as a nation, we as mankind cannot continue this. History dictates it. There has never been a society, a culture, a nation that has survived on fiat currency. Never. And what makes you think that we as a people do not have to pay attention to what history teaches us? What makes us so different? I don't have the answer to that, because I don't think there is an answer to that. I think that we are even more vulnerable to this fiat money system because of how encompassed and organized usurpingly that these bankers are. Folks, there's not a person in Congress that doesn't know this. The Congress has become an ineffective tool. It really has no more effect. And one of the things that history does teach us is that as tyrannies grow, they always try to centralize power. And that's exactly what they're doing. As a matter of fact, good old Chucky Schumer out of New York just last week made the comment that President Obama should be ruling by decree. Edward Mandell House, in 1913, Edward Mandell House, by the way, they called him the Colonel, even though he had no military time, helped to pick the charter members of the original Federal Reserve Board. Now, if you've been watching this program, you know the Federal Reserve is a private, foreign, for-profit banking corporation, and that the charter was put together secretly on a place called Jekyll Island, off of Georgia, by a cartel of international bankers, the Rothschilds, J.P. Morgan, the Warburgs, and so forth. Okay? So you had two people that were very instrumental in this. And one of them was the guy we're going to talk about now, Colonel Edward Mandell House, and the other one was Senator Nelson Aldrich out of Rhode Island. These two criminals and they are criminals, were very much instrumental in not only organizing this, but also keeping it secret. Because just like the Trans-Pacific Partnership now, the TPP, which you probably haven't heard about, all this negotiation is being done secretly. Folks, anytime they do something in secret, they're not looking out for your benefit. I think a third grader could tell you that. Edward Mandell House, his original name was Hughes, H-U-I-S, which became House, was born July 26, 1858, Houston, Texas. He became active in Texas politics and served as an advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, particularly in the area of foreign affairs. And he is the guy, my friends, that was partly responsible for the sinking of the Lusitania to get us involved in World War I. House functioned as Wilson's chief negotiator in Europe during negotiations for peace in 1917-1919 as a chief deputy for Wilson at the Paris Peace Conference. He died in March 1938 in New York City. Edward and his father had mutual friends in the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan dispensed of vigilante justice after the Civil War. In 1988, a new legitimate group was in charge of dispensing justice in Texas, the Texas Rangers. Many of the Texas Rangers were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Edward was the new master. Edward gained their loyalty by stroking their egos. Edward would use his money and influence to try and make them famous. Edward eventually inherited the leadership of the Texas Ku Klux Klan. Edward Mandell House helped to make 4 men governor of Texas: James S. Hogue, 1892, Charles A. Culberson, 1894, Joseph D. Sawyers, 1898. And by the way, that man was also very instrumental in the Spanish-American War of 1898. And S.W.T. Lanham in 1902. After the election, House was acted as an unofficial advisor to each governor. Now, how does that work? You're an advisor, but you're not an official advisor? What are you taking care of? Are you taking care of the things that are in the newspaper every day? No, you're taking care of the dirty deeds under the table. That's what you're taking care of. the dirty politics. Edward wanted to control more than Texas. Edward wanted to control the country. Edward would do so by becoming a kingmaker instead of a king. Edward knew, according to his writings, that if he could control just 2 to 3 men in the Senate and 2 to 3 men in the House and the president, that then he could control the country. Edward would influence the candidate from behind the scenes, like I just said. The people would perceive one man was representing them when in reality an entirely different man was in control. Can you say Barack Obama or Barry Soetoro if you want to use his real name? House didn't need to influence millions of people. He only needed to influence a handful of men. Edward would help establish, a secret society in America that would operate in the same fashion. And my friends, this society we have covered in leaps and bounds for all these years, the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, interestingly enough, up until about 10, 15 years ago, people like Rush Limbaugh and all the rest of the talking heads denied the Council on Foreign Relations even existed. You were a kook, you were a wacko, to use Rush Limbaugh's words, if you thought there was a secret organization known as the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, Mr. Limbaugh, the Council on Foreign Relations has been around since the 1920s. And their property is at the Pratt House in New York. Edward Mandell House was instrumental in getting Woodrow Wilson elected as president. Edward had the support of William Jennings Bryan and the financial backing of the House of Rockefeller's National City Bank. Edward became Wilson's closest, again, unofficial advisor. Edward Mandell House and some of his schoolmates were also members of the Cecil Rhodes Roundtable Group. The Roundtable Group, you've heard of the Rhodes Scholarship. This is what this all is for. The Roundtable Group, the backbone of the secret society, had 4 pet projects. Now listen to this is in the congressional record. Listen to what they want to accomplish. Okay? A graduated income tax. Done. A central bank. A central private bank. Done. Creation of the Central Intelligence Agency. Done. And the creation of an organization known as the League of Nations. Now, they didn't get, after World War I was started, so they can do multiple things, but one of the big things they wanted out of World War I was to format and begin a League of Nations so they could take a global control. Well, they didn't get it. The United States Senate refused to finance the League of Nations. So what'd they do? We're going to have another world war. And we'll change the name, make it more friendly, make it more appropriate to the American people. What'd they call it? The United Nations. Did it work? Absolutely. Worked just fine. Between 1901 and 1913, the House of Morgan and the House of Rockefeller formed close alliances with the Dukes and the Mellons. This group consolidated their power and became to dominate other Wall Street powers, including Carnegie, Whitney, Vanderbilt, Brown Harriman. Oh my God, Brown Harriman. Does that ring a bell to anybody who's watched this program? Brown Brother Harriman Union Bank out of New York. That's how we financed Hitler. We financed Hitler through the Brown Brothers Harriman Union Bank out of New York. And my friends, guess who the fund manager was between the Brown Brothers Harriman Union Bank out of New York and the Reich Bank of Germany? A guy named Prescott Bush, a senator from Connecticut, the grandfather of George W. and Dillon Reed. The Roundtable Group wanted to control the people by having the government tax people and deposit the people's money in a central bank. Done. The group would take control of the bank and therefore have control of the money. Done. The group would take control of the State Department and formulate government policy. Done. The group would take control and formulate government policy which would determine how the money was spent. Done. The group would control the CIA, which would gather information about the people and script and produce political operations focused at the people to influence them to act in accord with the Roundtable Group, State Department policy, and State Department policies decisions. Done. The group would work to consolidate all the nations of the world into a single nation with a single central bank under their control and a single international security system. Just about done. They're just about there if you don't research, get active, tell your friends, tell your family, let them know what's going on. Some of the first legislation of the Wilson administration was the institution of the graduated income tax. Done. And the creation of a central bank called the Federal Reserve. Done. An inheritance tax was also instituted. Done. These tax laws were used to rationalize the need for legislation that would allow the establishment of tax-exempt foundations. Done. The tax-exempt foundations became the link between the group members' private corporations and the university system. The group would control the universities by controlling the source of their funding. The funding was money sheltered from taxes being channeled in ways that would help achieve round table group aims. Done. That's how they took control of academia in this country, including the public fool system. Folks, I got to tell you, and I got to be quick with this. Actually, I don't have the time. At some point, I'm going to tell you an example of how much high school students cannot understand why you give them 4 cents when something is $3.99 because you have 4 cents. And you don't want 5 pennies, you want a nickel. They just can't concept it. President Mandell House had this to say in a private meeting with President Woodrow Wilson. This is the congressional record. Listen to his words. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system that's designed to keep track of the people that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. My friends, excuse me, we did not have a fiat currency in 1913. We did not have the technological support to register biological property. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being unable to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel. They will be our chattel. Our possession, their possession. Chattel, Black's Law Dictionary. Movable property which has been liened. And we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Can you say birth certificate? Think of the word certificate. It's a negotiable instrument. It holds value. Why do you think you bond your children, mothers? Why? Because you're ignorant. Do your research. We bond our children as surety to this scheme. I am bonded through the Midwest Bank Note Company. I was born 11/10/1958, 11/12/1958. I was bonded on security paper to the Midwest Bank Note Company. If you live in the state of Vermont, high probability chances are that you are bonded through the North American Bank Note Company. This is 1913, my friends. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent. You know, my friends, I don't have the time to get into all this language, but I can tell you, the next show, after we show this documentary to you that you're going to really enjoy and learn a lot, I want to get back to this statement, and we're going to break this language down. What's a chargeback? What's fiat paper? What's biological property? What's a national system? What's keeping track of the people? What's the ancient system of pledging that Mr. House is speaking of? What is security? What's a chargeback? But we know what our chattel is. Their possession, chattel, movable property which has been liened. You are their possession. You are merely chattel. Americans, even calling us Americans anymore is a disgrace to our ancestors who were true Americans. We're not Americans. We're ignorant, apathetic, cowardly chattel. That's what we are. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading. What is a bill of lading? To us, will be rendered bankrupt. What's bankrupt? And insolvent. What's insolvent? Listen to the language. Forever. What's forever? Forever is your lifetime. Beyond. To remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans, and if by accident one or two should figure it out, we will have in our arsenal plausible deniability. Well, my friends, let me tell you, I have figured it out, and there's others like me. I have been studying these people for over 30 years. I understood this before the day of the internet. Now you have the internet. Now it's at your fingertips at home. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on books. You don't have to take rides 2 hours away to law libraries anymore. It's right there. Research it. Understand what you are, and more importantly, what you are not. Understand the future of your nation as a people, your children as a loved one. We are in trouble, my friends. We are in deep, deep trouble. History shows us. History is my barometer. We cannot survive this. After all, this is the only logical way to fund the government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants. What is a registrant? Well, who registers everything? You do. You're the registrant. They're floating the liens and the debt to you in the form of benefits and privileges, not rights, but read what he's saying, benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call Social Security insurance. So why they have to do that? Because they needed to number you. They needed to categorize you. You're not Tom DeAmber, the flesh and blood entity. You're uppercase black ink Tom DeAmber with the Social Security identification number, commercial, corporate, insolvent, bankrupt, surety. Understand the language. You think you own anything? You don't own a thing. You register your dog? You don't own your dog. You register your car? You know who owns title to your car? The state. The state owns title to your car because they have the real title that comes from the manufacturer, and then they issue you a certificate of title. And this is why you have a certificate of title for your land. You do not have a allodial title. You have a certificate of title. Bearer use of. Someone is allowing you to use something of value. This is why you're a tenant, a joint tenant, or a tenant in common. But either way, you are not owner, you are a tenant. And if you think you own it, you go ahead and don't pay your extortion fee for 2 or 3 years called property taxes, and you're going to find out real quick who really owns title to your land. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president. And listen to what? What is he president of? Let me continue this statement, my friends. We will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against the American people. Can I read that again? The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president for our dummy corporation to foment this plot against the American people. Folks, you know what we're going to do? We're going to keep this statement. And in 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, because I really want to get into these CIST funds, you're going to be shocked at where all your court fees go. Shocked. Or maybe not. Maybe some of you are starting to see the light. Maybe some of you have done enough of your own research to understand who is really in control here. Listen to the words of Colonel Edward Mandell House and ask yourself, my friends, is that our state today? And I mean by state of affairs, dummy corporation, economic slavery, pledging system. And you think you're free? You really can look in the mirror and consider yourself to be a free man or a free woman? You know, my friends, I think Goethe said it the best. The philosopher Goethe. And this is what he said, and it's so true today. None are more helplessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. We are not a free people. Not at all. And how ignorant, apathetic, and cowardly are we that we do things like bond our children for this dummy, insolvent corporation that Mr. House was speaking of. What happened to Americans? We used to be a vibrant, free people, thinking people. We used to be accountable for our actions, and we held the government accountable for their actions. What happened to America? Like I said, we have children now, high school diplomas, that can't even count change back. Of course, if you watched this program 4, 5, and 6 weeks ago, you understood the document Secret Weapons for Quiet Wars that we did a 3-week programs on. And I told you, don't look this document up on your personal computer. You will be flagged. What does that say about where we are? That document was from 1954. And what was one of the things they wanted to do? They wanted to take control of education, which they did in 64. And they wanted to dumb down the American people so bad, so greatly, that they would have a 6th grade, the average high school student would have a 6th grade reading level. That was in their own documents. I say congratulations to them, because the average American high school student today has a 4th grade reading level. They've done a wonderful job. And look at the cost of education. My friends, we are not a free people. And there is not a lot of time left to do the research, to get involved. But understand it's out there. And you have to ask yourself, how did we get to this state in our minds, in our hearts, in our spirits? How do we become from a strong Judeo-Christian country, people, nation, to one of servitude, ignorance, apathy, cowardness. How did we get to this point? Well, we're going to touch on that matter for the next 2 weeks. I am very, very happy to announce that we are going to be showing a documentary called State of Mind. And I very much thank the producers of this DVD to give us permission to air it to you. I'm extremely thankful. My friends, I have watched hundreds, if not thousands, of documentaries, and I will tell you, as one gentleman told me back in the 70s, Americans will become Pavlov's dog. Now, I know 99% of you are saying, what is this guy talking about, Pavlov's dog? Well, you're going to understand Pavlov's dog when you watch this documentary. And you're going to understand the history of mind control, the implementation, the mechanics, where we are today, the technology, what their goals are, because there is a war on for your mind, your heart, your spirit. This is where we are in America today. I plead with you to please take the time in the next 2 weeks to watch this DVD. You are going to learn so much about the battle that is being waged for the control of your thinking processes, your reasoning processes, and your thought process. There is an active war, and it is a war being waged against sovereign, independent thinking in this nation. And you, through these tax-exempt foundations, think of that. We're going to make this unbelievable, burdensome tax system, but we're also going to have tax-exempt foundations for our means, while we all become sureties to a dummy, insolvent corporation's debt. We are not a free people. We are not a free people. And it is our responsibility to educate ourselves with truth, with knowledge, and understand and grasp where we are and turn this around before there is no avenue to turn to. My friends, myself, and all the people behind this camera are very, very thankful that you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. And please, 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 tune in for the next 2 weeks. Watch this documentary. You are going to be fascinated at the abilities of what I call the mind controllers. As always, we close in thanking you for watching. And as always, we close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines.